Okay, my tutorials today, well, I got a couple of them here. In this particular one, I'm going to show you how to use the window object and the .open method out of the window object. Basically, all it allows you to do is create a new window. I'm also going to use our first demonstration of how to use a function. Remember, we use functions to encapsulate code. And really handy because if we're going to call on a function multiple times and we have a block of code that we're going to go ahead and call on more than once, it's very useful. If we want to bundle it into its own file, we can use it in a variety of different HTML applications. So it's really handy stuff here. So first, let's look at the window and a .open method. There's a .close method. And it's really pretty simple. What it does is it just allows you to create a new window, open up a new window, and you got to use a JavaScript to do that. And here's the syntax on it. Syntax is the name of the URL, and you have to put that in quotes of the window you want to open up, and then whether you want to open it as a blank window or parent window, and then whatever specs you want to incorporate. Okay, so my application today that I wanted to use, and I'll pull up some files I've downloaded. So what I want to do is just have a little radio button. Let me see if I can show you this here. Okay, so my example here is just going to have a heads or a tails radio buttons, and use the window.open method. Okay, so the way this works, if I click on my radio button, we learned how to use these guys. All right, that pops up tails. If I click on heads, okay, whoops, let me pull it over to the screen where you can see it's going to pop up heads. All right, so just a simple application, and when you see how this is put together, it's really easy as far as the code goes, but there's a little bit of thought process in this interface. All right, so let's, one of the nice things we can do here is go into tools, and there's different ways to do this in IE versus Chrome. I'm going to show you how to do this in Firefox. I think you've seen this before, but I just go to developer tools, web developer tools, and I go to page source. The way I can shortcut is just Control U. Let's look at what we've done here. All right, and I still have my old header here. It needs to be updated, but let me go right down to my body. And so here's my code, and I'm using forms and functions here. That's the way your textbook states it. But if you look at these two lines here, I have my radio buttons, and if this radio button changes to heads, then we're going to call on a little function we've created called heads. If you click on this one, it's going to be called tails. And because I don't want this script to be executed except for when there's an on change event, I've actually stored the script up here. You'll look, I put it under header. Okay, you could put it somewhere else, but that's a nice place to put it. And I've created two new functions. So I have a function called heads and a function called tails. And the function that's called heads, all I do is I use the window method. So I say window.open. And that's kind of I don't think that's confusing, but it's indicative of any object-oriented programming language where you'll actually you can go ahead and encapsulate into a particular method several different features in there. Okay, so this one's just going to open up a window, and I'm opening up a window called heads HTML, and then I resize it, and I resize it to a width of 400 and a height of 400 because I don't want a full screen. And then it comes back down here. All right, and this is all covered in chapter 20, which I know you've read and you've answered some review questions for it, so it should be pretty straightforward. Let's look at these two HTML documents, and I'll tell you how I put these together. And I have them sitting over here, and I'm just going to use here's heads.html, and I'll just open them for simplicity in Notepad here. Pull that over here, and I'll make it a little bit bigger so you can. Okay, hopefully you can read that. But what this simply does, I have all my HTML heading information up here, but all it does is it calls up, read this line right here, it's going to call an image up. All right, and if I were to run it all on its own, it just opens up. What does it do? It just opens up a web browser and it displays this image. Now, where did I get this image? Because I'm doing heads and tails here. Well, I went up to Google and I did a search for coins, and I just happened to choose the penny here, and I grabbed an image of it from Google, and I brought that down into this folder. And so here's my image heads. I'll preview that. So that's all it looks like. And then I did the same thing, and I found a similar related image for tails. All right, so really this little piece of software I put together is a very simple example of how we can use the window.open method. It uses, there's 3 files here. If I'm going to move this over to my web server now, I have to bring all 3 files along. And then the other thing, it illustrates functions as well. All right, one more time here. Okay, so when my radio button, when I have the on change event take place right here, it calls a function. And a function is located inside a script. We always start a script with a space, and then we say type equals, and since everything we're doing is in JavaScript, we say / JavaScript, and then we always end the script. All right, and then we have our functions in here. Remember, any line in a function, or actually in any JavaScript, we have a terminator. Just point out all these little syntactical issues here that could potentially throw you. All right, so we terminate it, and functions, we give it a name. We put brackets. Sometimes we pass variables along, or parameters, and we'll talk about that in a future little webcast I have for you. And then in here we just follow the syntax. And the syntax, well, where did I get that? I looked that up, and I left a link for you here. Here's the window.open method, and there's these little, you guys have used W3 School's website throughout this class, but there's a little try it yourself examples that you can play with as well.